Much. Thank you. I just wish to give a bit of water in libation to these waters. As they nurture the lands which we are honoring today. So, friends in story, friends in the earth, my task today is very simple. It is to sweep through the corridors of time to create a pathway so that our beloved brothers and elders, Orland and Charles, may speak into the space within. It is to invoke a field of listening, where perhaps story can loosen its grip and that which wishes to be born can be conceived among us. It is to be a griot, heralding the thresholds of our imaginations so that sanctuary can set in. And for this, it is an honor to sit before you today in a time when the world is both waking and weeping. Waking to the reality that we have strayed far from the heartbeat of the earth, and weeping for the forests that burn, weeping for the waters that rise, weeping for the soils that crack. We are at a time of turning, a confluence of tipping points. This is a moment of profound reckoning. A time where the story of the global architecture of modernity is fraying at the seams, whether it is the story of climate change or rising inequality, whether it is the story of violent conflict or collapse of trust in institutions, whether these stories sit in a world where the legitimacy of intelligence or leadership is questioned, where the lines between what is natural or artificial are blurred, whether it is the story of crisis, polycrisis, metacrisis. The story before us is not merely a political or economic or ecological one. It is a rupture in the sacred covenant of relationship between self and other, between people and planet, between spirit and matter, between consciousness and will. It is a forgetting of the space between, a story seeking sanctuary. The veil is thin, its integrity thinning more. Yet this place I speak from cannot be written. This is a place older than the tongue, a place more ancient than the drum. This place lives in the breath before the first word, in the soil between every sealed room, in the pause that carries a continent's memory. This place is not anchored in speech. This place is a listening. This place is a return. This place is a time embracing timelessness. This place is a space between stories. We live in a time of escalating noise, where data dominates but coherence thins, where information escalates but understanding skims, where knowledge reverberates but wisdom dims. And here in the echelons of illusion, the earth speaks. The earth whispers through whirlwind and storm. The earth shouts through fire and flood. The earth screams through silence. In this space between stories, the earth calls us into collective listening, not as a passive endeavor, but where to listen is to remember. Listening is relational intelligence. It is how we read the soil, how we feel the grief of forests lost, how we sense when something is breaking in the land, breaking in community, breaking in the bones of our children, breaking in the fragments of dying stars. To listen through the space between is to abandon cognitive dissonance, the inner noise that arises when our values and actions are misaligned. To listen through emptiness is to soften into cognitive deference, the humility to yield to a wisdom beyond our dominant design. To listen with the void is to enter cognitive resonance, a state where mind, where body, where spirit, where cosmos attune to a deeper knowing. Deep listening nourishes through sight, through sound, through smell, through taste, through touch, through sensing. Deep ancestral listening flourishes through memory, through intuition, through movement, through time, through dream, through spirit. Listening is the space between stories. Listening through indigenous intelligence is how we know the river is rising before the clouds arrive. How we understand a drought is coming by silence, not by satellite. How we sense whirlwinds of a raging future. To listen with embodied intelligence is to feel the frequency of change before it becomes catastrophe. In listening, we journey from survive to thrive. And so, listening. Listening in the space between is oracular. Listening in the space between is mathematical. Listening in the space between story is divination. So to listen with precision is to lead. To listen with incision is to protect. And to listen with instruction is to re-story. It is to respond before the rupture. It is to respond within the limitation. It is to respond through the fragmentation. It is for we cannot shift what we cannot hear. We live in a time of loud forgetting, a time where we build futures that we do not remember. And in our collective forgetting, humanity has built systems that extract without consent, systems that calculate without context, that manage nature as though she was separate from self. As humanity, we have built a science that can measure carbon, but not the cost of disconnection. We have designed policy that can mitigate risk, but not remember rhythm. And for this, we are struck by collective anxiety. Yet perhaps we are not in crisis. Perhaps we're not at the end. Perhaps we're simply at the edge, at a threshold, the edge of return, a remembering. For there are times in history when humanity stands at the edge of its own design, a threshold moment. These are times when the old stories and the old ways of knowing have reached their limit, when the elastic has stretched beyond return. At these times, the choices are for us to return back as prodigal children, to rebound back from whence we came. Or perhaps the past goes so far into the realms of no return that it has no choice but to break. Or perhaps it remains elongated, having lost its elasticity, limp, worn, torn, dead. And we linger here, afraid to cross, unsure whether the bridge ahead leads to renewal or leads to nothing at all. Here is the threshold. A threshold is not a door. A threshold is a trembling. It is the space between what is known and what is unsayable. It is a potentiation. In some languages, the word for threshold is the same as the word for womb, that narrow, pulsing corridor through which spirit becomes flesh. In others, threshold and liminality are different sides of the same coin that plays with the raging waters of the ocean, prepared to meet the still scales of the cliffs at dawn. Others may call it a river, the crossing that dissolves identity before allowing new forms to arise. And in many traditions, the cave waits on the other side of that river, a place of unmaking, a place brewing the grains of consciousness. There in the cave, life is not absent but diffused. There the senses recalibrate. One learns to see in the dark. It is where prophets and poets and healers and scientists have gone to remember what knowledge cannot reach. It is where we are returned to the earth's interior until we recall our own interior. The cave holds sacredness because it has the concentrated memory of all who have sought refuge within it. Those seeking not only protection from wind or sun or cold, but those from the spiritual tempests of time itself. These are shelters from extinction, from separation, from the movements away from nature towards control, ownership, and scarcity. The cave holds within it the echoes of gods and goddesses, of storm and fire, of volcano and hail, of moon and tide, of solar rhythm and revolution, of re-evolution. It shelters dreams, dreams of futures and dreams of a forgotten past. And within that shelter lie conflicts. The sacred does not erase the conflict. It holds it. In these caves, In these cavernous interiors of memory, the walls breathe, the rocks sweat. The body, stripped of signal and noise, begins to hear again the rhythm beneath thought, the subterranean pulse that never ceases. Perhaps this is the apprenticeship being asked of us now, to let ourselves be reshaped by the silence that precedes speech, by the listening that precedes learning, to be apprenticed not to mystery, not to mastery, but to mystery, to find sanctuary. Because the paradigm that dominates us cannot cross this threshold. Its architecture depends on distance, on the idea that the world is an object to be studied, not a relative to be courted. But here at the edge, the intellect must bow to the intelligence of the void, the intelligence of the unknowing, the intelligence of movement and uncertainty. Here we meet the teachers modernity's empires have forgotten, the waters, the stone, the moss, the memory. They ask for no credentials. They ask only presence. They ask that we soften. They ask that we remember how to be porous to wonder. For in our porosity, we find that the earth has not stopped speaking. She has only been misread, misnamed, misunderstood. As a polyglot, the earth speaks many languages, and sometimes, as with Cyclone Idai, one of the deadliest tropical cyclones to strike the southern hemisphere in 2019, the earth speaks in storm. They called Idai a natural disaster. But for those who remember how to hear, the clue was in the naming. The word Idai, in the Shona language of Zimbabwe, is a command. It is an order. It is an impetus to love. Cyclone Idai was an injunction to love, not romantic love, not love as a metaphor, not love as epistemology, but love as a cosmological recalibration, love as law, love as a task. This wording came not to destroy, she came to instruct. She came to ask, where are the ones who remember? Where are the ones who still carry the instructions? Where are those who still know how to listen? The earth is calling them forth, not for sympathy, but for resonance. And in this curriculum of tragedy, Idai was calling for the original instructions. The spaces between remind us that our stories must be anchored in mandates that remind us how to live in balance, how to listen to the land, and how to pass forward more than we have received. To remember instructions that were present in our collective origins. These original instructions are not abstract. They are encoded in ceremony. They are encoded in ecology. They are encoded in story. They teach us how to walk in alignment, how to live without severing the thread between what is seen and what is sacred. They teach us that governance is not command, it is attention, it is attunement. These original instructions were never erased, but at times exiled. They were not forgotten, but at times forbidden. They were pushed to the margins of memory, rendered to mythology, dismissed as obsolete. But these instructions cannot be extinguished. They live in the cracks of ancient rocks, in the whispers of the wind, in the hush between waves, in the groan of trees rooted to a distant future. And now they return not as refugees, but as rightful custodians of a world ready to be realigned. These instructions are the route to cognitive resonance. They catalyze the conditions for cognitive justice. They open the space for cognitive ritual. For this space between them calls us into incisive listening, a listening that cuts through the noise, the illusion, the fragmentation. It calls us into integrative listening, a listening that connects across domains, across disciplines, across dimensions. It calls us into illustrative listening, a listening that reveals patterns, metaphors, teachings in what is heard. Here, the earth's lessons come in fractals, catalyzing fractals of listening, mitigating patterns of forgetting, harnessing the foundations for ethical repair. For what we do not hear in the river, we miss in legislation. What we fail to sense in the child, we fail to address in the climate. For when we listen to the earth in fractals, in patterns of deep hearing and heeding, A small resonance in one domain can restore the pattern across the whole, and when we listen, we may follow the way of the river. For in indigenous wisdom, we're taught that the fabric of society is woven by small, interconnected actions. Actions where we are all simultaneously teachers and learners, crafting a new way of seeing, a new way of doing, a new way of being. And to the sages, listening is the path towards restoration of the natural order, an order rooted in Ubuntu, a quantum principle that reminds us that we are because all that is. I am because you are. Listening is amplified by the Akan principle of Sankofa, an ethical imperative, a call to remember what has been dismembered, a return to right alignment, feedback in which the future is encoded into the past to enlarge the present. Listening is embalmed in the Kemetic adage of Ma'at, that which reminds us of the natural law that all phenomena are interconnected, interrelated, interdependent. These sciences, these living sciences, have guided whole systems of land, of law, of lineage for millennia. They invite us to move from extraction to relation, from urgency to intelligence, from performance to presence, and from attunement to atonement. This is the path towards harmony and balance. This is the path to lightening the heart so it weighs up against the feather. This is the way of the river. To listen with senses rooted in ancient wisdom requires us to take a different view, to take a different stance so we can see the codes of the universe from another angle. How can we, like the Niger River, seek to draw on the wellsprings of knowledge to serve the deserts within our collective consciousness and the wilderness in our communities? How can we, like the Nile River, not wait from the rain from above in the arid, barren wilderness, but allow the sacred knowledge that resides within all of us, that which we have carried through the long journey of generations of ancestry, from rain in distal places, to emerge from below and flood in the springtime, bringing fertility that will help nourish the future? How can we, like the Zambezi River, seek to find other sources of life-giving waters when the original runs dry? Sources that will lead to thundering wonders like Musiwa Tunya, the smoke that thunders. How can we, like the Congo River, find codes to the deepest healing in our deepest wounds? If we were to listen with a riverine heart, we would catalyze the power of the collective as we dream together, weave together, and activate prosperity for all. We would traverse the bridge between remembering and imagining. We would paint the world as we would wish it to become, and ultimately create the fractals of the universe. The river. The river is only one aspect of the earth. But perhaps the way of the river is the course less traveled. It is the route filled with jutting rocks and thorny brambles, at times finding itself choking and overgrown in the depths of the rainforest, and other times charting a tedious path in arid sparseness of the desert. Yet, this meandering river is filled with possibilities. Possibilities for creativity and innovation, possibilities for restoration and transformation, possibilities for activation and regeneration. But also to the possibility that sanctuaries are not places we enter. Sanctuaries are beings we become. That sanctuary is the softening within hardness, the breathing within structure, the remembering within forgetting. That even as the old paradigms crumble, the earth is still offering us a curriculum in the language of the wind, in the syntax of the rivers, in the grammar of the mountains, in the etymology of the sun. She may be called Pele, from the gurgling fires within. She may be called Yemenya, Nomkubulwane, Oshun, Heteru, the waters from above and below. She may be called the winds of Oya, the calm after the storm. These are the grammars of light. These are the spaces between the stories. And as we journey through this time together, let us not forget that the most enduring architecture is not built of stone. It is built of story. Let us write new myths for our time, one where the rivers are not dammed, the marginalized are not silenced, the soil is not poisoned. Let us write myths where difference is not deviance, where plurality is not a problem. Let us write myths not of conquest, but of kinship. Yet we cannot do this work from a distance. We must do it with the breath, We must do it with the body. We must do it with bone. To apprentice to the space between is to surrender to the slow re-education of the soul. To become again humble between the mystery of being alive. To listen until listening itself becomes the prayer. To kneel at the threshold of the living world and recognize it as a teacher, offering the only offerings that matter, our hearts, our souls, our tears, and our blood. To be attuned to the wisdom of unknowing. And now, as I close, allow me to greet you. In the languages of Southern Africa, let me say, as Elder Orland so beautifully expands and articulates, Sawubona. That through our collective listening, through our common oldest ancestor, the earth, I see you and I see you in me. And as we listen to earth, let us move from a hearing rooted in domination or dominion or domination to one anchored in Dumela, the Sotho greeting. That through our collective listening, we may find that I am in agreement with you. I flow in resonance with you. Your heart beats with the rhythm of my soul, where to see another is to believe them into being. So, in the spirit of Sawubona and Dumela, let us be in harmony and perhaps resonance with the essence of life itself. Let us potentiate these spaces between the story and become once more custodians of the sacred. Thokozani.
Just gotta let that settle for a minute. Listening doesn't just happen when somebody's speaking. There's a lag time. And I feel like I'm still listening to Rutendo. Words cannot be true just by being spoken. They have to be heard. And we've probably all experienced the feeling of really being heard, of really being listened to, and how the words, sometimes we say things wanting them to become true. Seeking the listening that makes them true. So listening is a creative act, bringing potentialities into actuality. So I'm very grateful that everybody has come with so much intention to listen. Because I've got a lot of things that I want to be true. And I need your help to make them true. In fact, the things that I will say, I might not even be able to say into a different listening. The listening is also a seeking. It's an asking that brings to it that which it seeks. I think a lot of us have the feeling that something wants to be born in our world today. That the crisis, the meta-crisis, the poly-crisis that Rutendo has invoked, is a birth crisis. That the unraveling of our systems and of our stories, of our myths, of even our identities is opening a space for something new to be born that could not come if everything else was in the way. And that's why, I don't know if it's just me, but going way back to Y2K, peak oil, financial collapse, all these things, even the most horrible potentialities, there's part of me that wants it to happen, that longs for what is on the other side of that collapse. I used to think that collapse would save us. I used to think that the prospect of collapse would save us. I used to think that maybe if climate change got bad enough, if species extinction got bad enough, if the situation on Earth would get bad enough, then we would have to change. That our choice would be outsourced to these forces. But I've changed my opinion about that. Now I see it more as crisis bringing a moment of awareness, a moment of consciousness of something we had not been conscious of before, that then makes it available for choice. And we are in a moment like that right now, where the old stories that told us who we are, how to be human, what's real, what's possible, how the world works, how change happens, they're not working anymore. At least not the ones I grew up in. Because we were supposed to be in utopia by now. Progress was supposed to be progressing towards something good. And about in my childhood, actually, people already stopped believing that story, but they believed that they believed it still. And what's happening now with every shockwave that impacts the edifice of reality / story, that pretense of belief is disintegrating. Whether it's COVID, that for so many demolished the story of medicine, or the Epstein files, which for many demolished the legitimacy of our elites, to the Iran war, which has revealed power in its naked essence. More and more people disbelieve the stories, the mythologies that have held us for so long. But a story isn't just a story. Story is kind of the outer layer on something that goes much deeper. It's a state of being, when you enter a certain story, you feel different. If you enter a story and you are, let's say, a forest, and you are looking at it through the mythology of plant physiology and woody tissue and the conversion of thermodynamic potential energy into entropy in a dissipative system, like you're going to feel a certain way. When you take the life out of creation with the story that at bottom everything is just protons, neutrons, and electrons bouncing around according to mathematical forces, that everything that we see and experience is just the configuration of generic particles, a different mixture of atoms and void, and that's it. Like that, there's a certain feeling to that. There's a certain state of being that actually was necessary for humanity to explore. And when you go into a forest, in the story of this forest is alive, in the story that there are intelligences operating here, you will feel very different. And as you cultivate that feeling and uphold it in community, the story becomes true. The forest becomes alive, and other intelligences begin to operate in a tangible way. So we all sense the desire of a new story to be born as the old ones fall apart. And maybe sometimes, now I know for a lot of people here this has happened a long time ago, or it's happened repeatedly and a long time ago, when you everything you thought was real and certain and reliable disintegrated, and you didn't even know who you were, and you may have even felt a sense of vertigo. For many of us, this has happened through the gifts of collapse in our own lives. And for some, it has not yet happened. And when that happens, what I've learned is that maybe not to go too quickly to a new story, because the old story will present itself in a new disguise. Or somebody will offer a story to replace the one that had given sense and meaning to life. A fascist story, for example, that says, here's who you are, here's what this nation is. It's better to be comfortable in the space between stories. So that the new story has time to arise in correspondence to the state of being, the next iteration of yourself that you are ready to choose. Are you ready to choose it? That's not an exhortation. It's an offering for introspection. And if you're not ready, that's okay. The programming of what I call the old story, the story of separation, the story that holds us as discrete, separate selves in a world of other, is very deep. The programming is very deep. It takes some time to deprogram from that, for the birth process to push us out and for the evolutionary draw to pull us forward. The universe is so generous that it's not only collapse that forces us to face a choice, it's also that the choice is presented to us. We get glimpses of what could be. We get glimpses of who we could be, of what the world could be. We get experiences that violate what we knew to be real, what we knew as human nature, what we knew to be physics. There are those on Earth who are hosts for these other realities that have kept them intact for a very long time, waiting the readiness of those who journeyed into the story of separation. And in this moment, we feel gratitude for those cultures of memory, as Orland calls them, indigenous cultures, wisdom schools, lineages, that held not only a different story, but the state of being that goes along with it. So that, and it's not just that. There are other outreaches from beyond the story that has held us for so long, that pull us in addition to the pull, that assure us that there is actually a there's something to choose. And so gatherings like this, we're drawn to people who have also had those glimpses and who can reaffirm, yeah, that was real. There is something there. Because it's very hard to hold a separate reality by yourself when everybody else is telling you that you're crazy. You need other people to be crazy together with you to hold that reality and that state of being and to normalize it, to listen to those stories and perceptions so that we know that they are true, so that they become true. I want to say one more thing before I turn it over to Orland. It's been very much on my mind, and I'm sure many of yours, the war in Iran. Yesterday it looked like we were on the verge of something very bad. Trump saying that I will end their civilization, announcing war crimes baldly. It felt like the future was balanced on the edge of a knife. And today I woke up to read of a 2-week ceasefire. What happened? The answer is I have no idea. on one level, I have no idea. What happened? Did the president of China call him up, and make a threat? Did his advisors talk sense into him? Was it a bluff all along? What happened? What happened? It felt like we were on the edge of a knife between two different timelines. What happened? Well, the story of causality that I inherited through my fancy education is insufficient is inadequate to the task of making sense of that or anything else that's happening in the world. It's all about, forces. All about forces. That's the theory of change that I inherited. A force is exerted on a mass and things change. That really limits us. It limits our ability to change the world according to how much force we have at our disposal. And it makes even those who want to change the world for the good first seek to amass as much money or power or audience as possible, and then they're playing the same game as everybody else. There has to be another way, and cultures of memory have preserved this other way. And so I'm learning to perceive these other causal influences. I want to name one that is very practical for everybody here. Maybe we were discussing, I think with Evan yesterday, I think we were discussing, I can't remember actually, all these conversations are merging together, but that if nuclear war is going to be stopped here, maybe it has to be the generals or even the submarine commanders or the missile-based commanders who refuse to obey that order. And it's very hard to do that. It takes tremendous courage to refuse an order. It takes tremendous courage, in fact, to not be a team player. If you're one of President Trump's, inner circle, to defy the story that they have created, the hero story that they've created, that takes courage. It takes a reclamation of your will from where it has been outsourced to. So, anytime that any of us do that, we are actually helping others to do that. And I think all of us have opportunities to do that. When there's something that this is the way it is done, this is the way it should be done, this is what is practical, this is, I can't do it any other way because, I need to pay my mortgage, I can't offend these people. Like we all have these ways that we outsource our sovereign choices. And in the moments where we reclaim them, we give hope not just to humanity, but hope to ourselves too, because we demonstrate in the most tangible way possible what a human being is in such a circumstance. What a human being is in such a circumstance. What a human being is not something written into our genes. It's not some external thing called human nature, that what a human being is. It is something that we are creating through our choices and demonstrating to ourselves. As Orland says, reality is not finished. And that includes the human being.
Thank you for hosting us, inviting this space. And thank you for bringing the time here, the times here. Some years ago, in doing some research, the question was asked, are you and I a part of the same reality? And if so, how do we know? How do we know we are in a shared reality? We inherited a certain kind of body, that carries a memory for us, in which we don't have to think creatively every moment we have to use it. No one thinks for the heart what it must do, or the liver, or even our hands and feet. We don't think body. The body thinks us. It gives us how to be in the world, in a shared time and space. What an amazing gift to not have to think every time we want to do something exactly how to do it. We have committed so much to memory in our bodies that we've forgotten what a miracle it is to store the intelligence that keeps us approximating where to be and when, to be able to have the conversations that we're having now. The body helped most of it to happen. Memory helps us to return to places and times because we don't have yet and the active use of the intelligence of freedom to override what the body instructs. We don't live yet a little bit outside of the body. Or to wake up and give the body what other levels of consciousness has prepared while we were asleep. We don't go to sleep saying we're going to end the war in Iran tonight when we sleep, because we don't know how to do that yet. Because we orient, the body orients us to a reality that only works when we wake up. And we don't really wake up fully. We choose to come back to the agreements of a naive reality. Maybe I'll show up if it's interesting. Or if it allows me to get what I want from it. But we don't wake up to show up, to participate in reality becoming so real that if we want to say to something enough, that is enough authority to end it. We don't speak from beginnings. We don't speak anymore from beginnings. We speak in between stories, where we feel powerless. Mostly. We want to protest something as not right. This is the creative cultural space, even for those who want to do good. But there's a memory that's trying to come into our bodies, into our time together. That asks us to be more willing in waking up the creative forces. And this is, as you said, is very difficult to do. Even if we have the intuition by ourselves to do it, we still need mutual consent from the other to share it. Because we can't be in a reality by ourselves. We can't be human by ourselves. Human nature is two or more. So much of our intelligence requires agreements. Even to conceive a child, we need the agreement of two forces of intelligence to harmonize in conception for another human being to come into the world. And we use this yin and yang energy all the time to overcome the paralysis that our bodies can generate if I forget all the way that it has to live for something more than the material world. So I resurrect my will every day to give the body a little bit more endurance to capture light, to orient towards we call futures, the creative act of intelligences that wants to deposit in our time a new story that includes more of the world. The body remembers one thing that is so beautiful. It remembers utopia. It remembers a time in which everything was effortless, in which we were carried by great dreams, the dreams of the gods. It remembered inheriting a perfect union with spirit. It remembers these intelligences working to craft and create the spaces we call perception and cognition, so that we could appreciate them with ritual. We now call religion. But in doing so, in remembering utopia in ourselves, a quality sneaked into consciousness that began the separation. Did you get more utopia than me? A little bit of envy that you use your utopia a little bit more flashy than I. You put some bling on your utopia. We're fighting about one thing. Whose inheritance of this body is more true? And we withhold our willingness to participate in the futures that our bodies are asking us to share. In working out many things around the ancient shrines and the current struggle in the blood of human life, the literal blood of human life, that we can say carries the gene codes, the quality of memory, of ancestry and such. But you know, there's a time in which the body didn't carry genes. It carried starlight. The potency to create black holes. That's the blood. That's the ancient blood of humanity. A substance so pure that anything comes into it had to become perfect, had to become crystallized to hold light. And we lived in that creative power for quite a long time, suspending the need to have form. We just loved the activity of being in creation, with creation. And this intelligence flowed through us. We now call it our soul. The predecessor of our blood was our soul. And intelligence that moved through the cosmos and learned all measure of creation. Distributed itself as wide as possible and chose to differentiate, chose to create distinctions of intelligence for Earth reality. So to be incarnated on Earth, we have to have a specific intelligence of the universe, a specific code of the universe, the cosmos. Everyone has to have a specific memory of the cosmos as so. And then create a group from that. As much as we would think we born into our families and inherited their genes, the soul says, don't get caught in that story. The genes only to tie us to an effort, a co-creative effort, to bring more of the cosmos in, the larger cosmos of story. And so initiation used to be done at a certain age to give the blood back to the cosmos so that another story could be reshaped as memory into the blood. But even the blood wanted to move around the earth. And so we call it migration. The human being used the earth, or the earth used human beings to move out from homeland, from home, into a larger event. And our blood changed codes. We became very different in characteristics of body, mind, soul, and spiritual ritual. Not by accident, but by providence. Something is guiding that story. In the 1920s, a young poet by the name of Langston Hughes was crossing the Rio Grande, going to visit his father, the river between Mexico and the US. And a memory came to him. And I'll share this poem he wrote. I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turned all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep, like the rivers. When these words came through, it created a renaissance, a rallying point in Harlem, New York, for young people in particular who had the creative aspiration to reach for the memory of soul. was so creative a space in consciousness that so much creativity poured in. This is like just a few years after the abolition of slavery, a few decades after the abolition of slavery in the United States and the reconstruction of the psyche, where those who were enslaved could feel their freedom again. But the words to inspire how memory comes in was what this poem brought. And they started to gather every day to write and dream and create. And it's called the Harlem Renaissance. A kind of mystery school for the return of the willingness to overcome prior disruptions of story. But in it was the idea that those who were enslaved in this experience started to transmigrate. They couldn't migrate, they couldn't leave the plantation, but they chose to use another method of creation. The will of spirit, the will of soul. And they ventured so far that the Industrial Revolution in our world was inspired by their creation. They couldn't own the very patterns of their creation because they weren't citizens of the United States in particular. So all of their inventions were taken and integrated into society for wealth creation and the advancement of the civilization of our world. From soul travel, from time travel. They went into futures and worked on becoming human with it. And there were so many ways in which what was taken from soul into body and heart and mind and given into creativity and culture, that was taken away over and over and over. But there was one thing that was created, that is still in creation, that it was so creative that if you're to be in it, you have to find your own power of creativity. It's called jazz. You can't play the same note at the same time. However, a harmony could be found where the creativity is that if two or more willing to play jazz, you have to listen to your soul, not to your mind. And our elders tell us that was the end of their world of exploitation. Jazz ended exploitation. Nobody could steal jazz. It's so free. It could be given away easily by improvisation of technique and willingness for my will and your will to do something that we can't necessarily practice doing. You just have to be willing to do it when the moment arises. Because soul is more in the future than in the past. And this process prepares something else in consciousness. This improvisation, this co-creation out of nothing of pattern and recognition, but mutual agreement that music is still coming into the world from a source that is the great mystery. Stories are still coming into the world from these other sources of the great mystery. Currencies are still coming into the world from other levels of intelligence, not scarcity. But our bodies have to now be in alignment with each other's future, far more than we are allowing it at the moment. So the space between us includes the entire cosmic force that is willing to work with us in a way in which it gives us back the capacity that the soul knows how to remember. But also remember the future, remember how to improvise. This ecology in consciousness is our age, and much more than our age alone. Because it becomes now prophetic space in which what my presence is calling out of you, what you can't use for yourself. And the same is for me. You are bringing my futures to me. We didn't arrive at this threshold of modernity and complexity by accident. We had to go into the very substance of our envy. The first corruption. That we could recreate utopia and don't include others. Not on Earth, I'm sorry. Earth doesn't allow that. Really, it's not, Earth does not allow creating a future that excludes others. Why I'm saying, even our children wouldn't want to live there. Our children are not being born with an interest in something that we will always inherit. Because the sole qualities that they remember is the fact that they're coming here to share something. And as you said, the earth has all of this, it's a polyglot. It has the potential for all languages. So is every young born human being. You put a child anywhere in the world, it will adapt to that culture. And in some way, the DNA will start to change to remember the ancestors of that culture. So the question, could people of European histories be African? Yes. How? By allowing the future of Africa to come in. How? By letting the bodies go through its waking and the transformation of the blood. From trying to repeat rituals of culture and not rituals of memory. We owe it to the future to allow our bodies to become hosts for the great wisdoms of the cosmos. We are at the edge of the old story because we're all interested in jazz. We know it when it's played. We call it radical collaborations. We call it all kinds of things. What is jazz? And we can play it well when we allow ourselves. And don't get me started on hip hop. I hear the young choir boys singing hip hop. It is the most adorable. To hold, the language, understand people, to use it in hip hop. Oh my God! It's like an entire new cosmos is coming from that. We're the oldest human memory bodies on this continent. Listens to the universe in a certain way. That is so modern, so contemporary, so creative. I just want to hear it. I just want to hear them sing it. Why? It's this technique is not about Earth alone. Hip hop meant going to other places. It's time travel. Where the body jumps. It looks like the physical body is just moving here, but the soul is jumping all over the cosmos. And they improvise words and songs, and it's called freestyle. Technology of creation. Thank you.
Okay, I want to. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Orland just said, my presence calls forth in you that which you cannot use for yourself. So why is it there if you cannot use it for yourself? It's there because we are in this world to create things together that we can't create for ourselves. Like, what use are these things that are only useful for others? And when we don't use them, we feel very uncomfortable. We feel uneasy. Because they don't belong just inside, and they get angry if they're not allowed to not allowed out to play. There may be some worlds, where the world bifurcates, and there are the saved and the damned, and some people drop by the wayside, and the elite create something without them. But as Orland was saying, this is not such a world. The very thing that we are learning in this cycle of humanity well, Rutendo said it too, Ubuntu. Another way to put it is it's a rewriting of the golden rule, which the ordinary formulation is do unto others as you would have them do unto yourself, a rule. And then, Jesus will be pleased. But really, the original formulation of that saying is, as you do unto others, so you do unto yourself. Which means that it is completely impossible to have the future that we are here to bring that doesn't include everybody. And I just look at the state of the world and I'm wondering, how many times does it take for us to learn that? So I'm involved in a little bit of peace work on a political level in the US. And I was in a conversation yesterday, actually, where this man called me and he said, you know, we have to, Evan was there listening to the conversation, like we have to let everybody know what a catastrophic war this will be. You know, oil will go up to $200 a barrel, terrible things will happen to us. And I said, you know, I don't think that's actually the right narrative. The bad things that'll happen to us if we are not careful. Because that mindset is essentially the mindset of the fortress that says that we can keep out the bad things that are happening to us. Like, what if you can, though? Like, what if the war in Iran could succeed according to the definition of Donald Trump and the foreign policy establishment in America? What if we could ruin Iran, take all the oil, and never suffer any consequences, and have a global total surveillance system that can preempt any terrorist act? They're building satellites now that have pulsed energy weapons that could kill any human being instantly anywhere on Earth. And AI algorithms that could predict who is going to commit a terrorist act. Like, what if the war could succeed? Because if you say...
A very prominent science fiction book called Parable of the Sower, written by Octavia Butler. She's transitioned now, but she was more of a prophetic host for stories that we will remember a long time from now. So we're calling it science fiction now. But in Gnostic traditions, fiction becomes fact. When enough people remember why it came in as an imagination in the first place. There are many scientific discoveries or actualities now that were considered fiction some time ago. We don't know how we got to be in a world with so many technological advancements, innovations, that were, for some people, still a fiction of mind and power. This question, again, for me, we don't yet know the nature of our souls. We know the nature of our minds, and we want to figure out a mental way to create our world. But most of the reality we live in was not mind-generated. Nature is not a mind-generated reality. The earth is not. None of the elements are. They help to give us our mind by reflection and contemplation and ritual over a long time. Even the intellect was created by substances out of nature. And we don't know it has an alchemical process on our very organism of being, how we think, we become. But the reverse is also happening. The soul is now beginning to say, no more thinking of the world that way. And we're concerned that the mind is now unable to hold behavior in a consistent way, or identity in a consistent way, or relationships in a certain way, unless we move to another level. I remember working with a young man, I've shared a story to some before, with schizophrenia. He had just been diagnosed with schizophrenia. His mind was all over. And his mother asked, can you work with him? But I spent 20 hours a day in observation with him, at different intervals. Where are you? And I chose to be a host for the mind that can create a shared reality. How do I do that? I have to keep asking the being, where are you? Who are you? after about 2 weeks, he recognized me. Recognized me as I recognized myself. So it wasn't just physical presence. It's like, I see you seeing me. And I know we are here. But in my mind, as I begin to feel where his reality is, it was so challenging. It's an alternate state of being for me, to be with a human being that I understand and he understands me with such radical parameters of consciousness. But from there, we could actually communicate almost telepathically within a realm of observation of the psychiatrists and the nurses in the psychiatric hospital that would come and support him. So one day, the psychiatrist came and questioning him, "Are you hearing voices?" and such. And he said yes. And the psychiatrist asked, "What are they saying?" And he said, "They're saying, 'Are you hearing voices?'" And he started to laugh. I looked at him like, wow, that's like a classic psychological twist. So the psychiatrist looked at him. Because it was a sense of, your mind cannot contain what I know. Your mind, the psychiatrist's mind, couldn't contain the reality that he wanted to belong to. But what was interesting, as he looked at me, he was in one reality. He looked at the psychiatrist, he was in another. Just eye contact changes the orb of shared reality. How did he come all the way back into what we call normalcy? His girlfriend was pregnant. They were pregnant, and she came into labor. So we noticed the anomaly of an adjustment, well, a few days before, an adjustment in consciousness. And the psychiatrist was, if this progressed, he would be able to go, just like 2 weeks before the child was born, he'd be able to go home. But when the mother went into labor, he stood up with such clarity in communication. And they said, wow, this is like time to go home. And the child was born, and he came back into this reality. I took him from this psychiatric hospital the same day to his daughter's birth hospital. He held his child, and their Saubona kept him there. Now 22 years. There was an agreement between him and his child that he followed to come back into a state of mind in which he could care for her. These things can't just be explained without observation of the dynamics of change that two or more human beings can co-create. But we have to be willing to give time to the phenomena we call body-mind without the judgment that something is wrong with you if you express the body-mind in a different way. Critically, we have more in common in the spiritual world than we do in our own physical reality. And we have to begin now to host these other levels of ourselves and risk being changed. Because one thing that Octavia Butler keeps saying in the book, God is change. God is change, meaning the God principle within us not only wants to heal the conflicts in ourselves, but wants to heal the space between us. This particle life that knows how to bring us closer into the agreement of a shared reality. And we depend on it.
Rutendo, will you say something?
Yes.
I think of the young man, I assume he was young, coming back into his being when his child came in to see him into returning. And I think of Baba Credo Mutwa speaking about, or even our ancient African traditions speaking about the forgettings that precipitate what we may call transgressions, what we may call criminalities or crazinesses. And that in our ancient cultures, these transgressions were just a forgetting that needed a reminding, that needed a sawona, that needed a seeing into being. So if we had a serial killer, the question would be, what is it that he or she has forgotten? And perhaps what it is that he or she has forgotten is the essence of life itself. And so he or she would be brought into adjacent room to a birthing room where a mother was in labor, and allow him or her to listen to the cries of labor, to life seeking to come from the inner sanctuary of the womb into the reality that we share. And when the child was born and went through the birth canal, that child would be handed to the transgressor, or the one who is perceived as the transgressor, so that he or she could smell, nusa, the essence of life itself, through the blood, through the birth fluids, through the essence of new life, and that is what's required to restore the ability to be present here and to be healed from the said transgressions. So I wonder to what extent many of our transgressions that we have as a collective, as humanity, can be brought into the adjacent to that birthing room. And what is the child that is seeking to be born into our collective reality that is still tethered to the umbilical cord, still tethered to the placenta of consciousness that is pulsating the wisdoms from the ancient futures and ancient pasts, and how we as humanity can collectively inhale that essence to remember that which we've forgotten as life itself. How can we as humanity look into this collective transgression, which is not a transgression according to ancient African law, but simply a forgetting?
Thank you. So, I heard you recently on a podcast say, and please contextualize it for me if I'm taking out of context, that in terms of AI, that's something like, you said something like not feeling positive or negative about it. Just wondering what you're thinking, feeling about it at this moment, and what perspectives you have on the human movement, which I only came across in the last couple of days, and their attempts to really put a halt on AI development where it stands at the moment. You might have to say about those kind of things and for the other speakers as well.
I'll just say that AI doesn't meet the most urgent needs that we have right now. You know, there's already several billion songs on Spotify that I could listen to. AI could make billions more in a week. But what I need is somebody to sing to me.
That's right. That's right.
To hear you sing.
And AI can generate stories and movies, you know, in seconds, whole stories. But what I need is for somebody to be feeling something when they tell me that story. Et cetera, et cetera.
Can I ask a question? Just in terms of practical thinking, I mean, first of all, thank you for the beautiful talks from all three of you. They're really moving and heartfelt, but they're all operating, the way I've understood what's been said is they're really for us to take on individually. So this is an individual level thing that we're talking about, is how we individually connect with spirit and so on. The problem for me is that the systems within which we operate are corrupted. So what are some practical steps we can take toward fixing the systems? And I acknowledge and understand the message that we need to be focused on fixing ourselves first. This is the most important. Without that, you can't really fix anything meaningful in any case. And I agree with you, the AI thing, I mean, AI is just a tool. We get to decide how to use it. Fixing ourselves gives us the platform to use tools effectively and for the right reasons. But the entire system within which we're all operating is corrupted. So how do we work toward fixing the system and helping other people? I mean, this is a room full of very high-level thinkers. And we're a privileged group of people here. We're able to think at a self-actualization level because we're not worried about where our food comes from tomorrow. How do we help fix systems to enable more people to reach this level and be able to have this type of conversation? I know it's a hard question.
Well, you know, we're not within a system. The human life, the human conceptual life, is above all systems. Is around all systems. The systems are between us. Mm-hmm. The theme of what we're holding here is that every reality is a space between us, including the systems. So it's a dialogue. If the system is not working, why? If the system is working, why? For every what that exists, there's a how that makes it exist. The system is a how, not a what. It requires human will. And so why is it that it's taking human will? Why are we involuntarily giving our will even to thinking that it exists? When people say, yes, this is spirit, but this is the real world. It's not the real world. It's an artificially sustained world by mostly unconsciousness. So if we want to say, how do we get out of the habit of unconsciousness? That's the first step of changing a system. because most of us inherited it. We didn't participate in its creation, but we don't know how to really separate our will from the unlawful use of our will to sustain. So part of the feeling we carry is that we don't want to keep giving our will to it. Well, how do we leave? How do we take it back? This is really where we are.
Yes.
This is where we. So the practicality is, what levels of will makes the system work? The unconscious will. And conscious agreements changes whether we are giving our will further or not. The question will the generals who give their will to maintaining the military process continue to take orders where their will is used without love? Will they say enough of that? All systems, military, scientific, is to whether we agree with the use of our will to make the world practical. And so this is really where we are at the very edge of this. In systems thinking, the critical thing, how do we know that our will is needed for something else? We just look at the world as it is, and we will feel that is not what I want to keep doing. So consciousness moves out of the system and comes back to it. Move out of it and comes back to it. Critical thing, if we're only doing it individually, we don't get the conversation about the futures that the systems require from us. And this is really, again, designing for another way of being together. And then the system moves into other levels of proficiency. But it's well, maybe there's some other point. It's not one thing. When we say the system, in all systems design, the archetypes give us our unique way of seeing the system. So we're not looking at the same thing. We're looking at our part of our will in it. And we don't know that in all the organizations in our world, all the different disciplines in our world, all the different systems in our world are created by 9 things, 9 archetypes. But how it shapes what we do is so unique. Again, when I share the story that the cosmos gave us a very unique way of being in our world, this is the key thing. We've surveyed hundreds of organizations. There are only 9 things they're all made of nature. There are no systems that run without the 5 levels of the human being. But we don't know that about ourselves and the world.
I want to give your point your attention just for, I know there's many others, but point your attention just for a minute at a level of causality that you might feel operating right now that is not from the paradigm of fixing whether ourselves or a system. I had my theory or my training on how to change a system. You write a book about it, and then you try to get people to read the book, and then maybe they're going to say, wow, this is so brilliant, let's change. But what I realized is that there is nobody standing outside the system who can change the system. So, and I realized that the system creates a consciousness, and the consciousness creates the system. And that the ideas in sacred economics were incompatible with the consciousness that corresponds to the story of separation, the story of scarcity, and the story of control. and the story of quantity, the cult of quantity. So that was why I became more and more interested in not how to fix things, but what is my contribution, my participation in a process of change. And well, maybe I'll just add, if you are only operating from, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but the mentality of fixing, the mentality of standing outside something and exerting a force to change this mechanism and that mechanism, you will encounter despair. Because the problems are impossible to solve at that level. You have to step outside the story of what is real that many of us have grown up in, into other causal systems that are held by many cultures in Africa. And if you go there and you immerse in that reality, things happen that are utterly impossible from what you learned. This happened to me when I went to Taiwan when I was a young man. And I saw things happen that could not happen. So I thought, okay, I guess that the reality that has been narrated to me is deficient. And so and so I began learning about other causal principles. Morphic resonance would be one. Ceremony would be one. And then discovering that actually the world that we take for granted and that we believe is working according to mechanical force-based principles actually isn't. That money, for example, is something very different than what we have been told. Okay. Sorry, that was a little long. But yeah, this is a beautiful inquiry, actually. That because it runs up against this despair. Like that despair is such a gift. When you reach the limit of what is possible from the story that you're in, and it is hopeless, and you just like you give up trying to do things the way that you had been doing them. I sure hope that our civilization does that. Gives up trying to do things the way we've been doing them, with one technical fix after another, each generating more problems than it solves.
Yeah.